The champagne was still foaming on the table when she handed me the divorce papers. 6 years of breaking my back, building a future for us, and she called me deadweight. I stood there, clutching cheap roses, while she toasted my betrayal with her best friend. That was the day the man I was died, and the man I became started breathing. But when she crawled back on her knees, sobbing for a second chance, I showed her what it feels like to beg for a ghost. 6 years. You don't realize how long that can stretch until you're living every minute of it chasing a future that was never really meant to be yours. Name's Ethan Carter. And for what felt like forever, my whole world spun around one thing: helping my wife, Brooke, make her dreams come true. It wasn't just some pretty words I said when we stood at the altar. It was a vow that sank into my bones, into every sore muscle, every sleepless night, every prayer I whispered while gripping the steering wheel of that beat-up old delivery van. I dragged myself out of bed before the sun even thought about rising, stacking pallets in ice-cold warehouses, the endless beep of forklifts ringing in my ears. Then I'd clock out, grab some crusty sandwich from a vending machine, and roll straight into my evening shift delivering packages. Amazon, groceries, pizza, if it fit in a box or a bag, I hauled it to somebody's doorstep. I'd force a tired smile, trying to hide how close I was to falling apart every time I stumbled through that door at 3 in the morning. And there she'd be, Brooke, curled up on our threadbare couch, nursing textbook open like a fan around her, half asleep but fighting it. She'd blink up at me, eyes as exhausted as mine, and whisper, "Just a little longer, baby." Those words were my lifeline. I'd kiss her forehead, pull a blanket over her, and tell myself real love wasn't about comfort. It was about sacrifice. It was about stitches sewn from aching backs and empty wallets. I watched her push through migraine after migraine, pulling all-nighters before exams, battling that voice inside her that said she wasn't good enough. And, God help me, I admired her for it. I didn't see the danger signs back then. Not really. I told myself the distance between us was just stress. The way her laugh didn't light up the room anymore. The way her eyes flicked away when I said, "I love you." How she stopped asking about my day. I thought we were just worn down, grinding uphill together. Whenever she broke down after a bad practice test or doubted herself, I'd pull her closer, hold her tighter, and push myself harder to give her a foundation she could stand on. There's one night that sticks sharper than the rest. The night she got her acceptance letter. She screamed, jumped into my arms, her happiness so fierce it nearly knocked the wind out of me. "We did it," she cried. And I believed her. I really, stupidly believed it was we. A team. Not just her. What a fool I was. Every single dollar I scraped together went straight into her dream. Textbooks that cost more than our electric bill, lab coats, clinical supplies, gas money to get her to hospital rotations. Meanwhile, I was walking around in shoes with holes big enough to feel the gravel. My idea of splurging was throwing a slice of bacon on a cheap drive-thru burger. None of it mattered. I told myself over and over it would pay off someday. That one day we'd sit back, laugh about the hard times, wrapped in the better life we'd fought for. That was the dream, right? Bleed together now, rise together later. But what I didn't realize, what I was too stupid, too trusting, too blinded by love to see, was that in her mind, the finish line wasn't the beginning of our new chapter. It was the end of my usefulness. I was the training wheels she couldn't wait to ditch once she found her own balance. All those whispered promises, all those forehead kisses at midnight, they weren't sacred vows. They were transactions with invisible expiration dates. And when the clock ran out, I wouldn't even get the dignity of a heads up. There's a special kind of cruelty that lives in hope. It makes you miss the little signs, the way someone you love starts packing up their soul without ever saying a word. You stand there, smiling like an idiot, holding out your heart while they're already holding something else. New dreams. Dreams that don't have a place for you. 5 years. 5 years of breaking my back to build something that was only ever meant for one of us. 5 years of just a little longer, baby, echoing in my ears like a lullaby, hiding a slow, quiet goodbye. I carried that hope around like some idiot clutching a winning lottery ticket he never bothered to check, thinking it was going to save him, thinking it would change everything, when really, it was nothing but a worthless scrap of paper once the numbers finally showed. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. I wish I could say I noticed how her hugs started to feel hollow, how she flinched when I talked about the future. But love, it doesn't blind you by covering your eyes. It blinds you by filling them with so much damn light you can't see the cracks right underneath your feet. I didn't see it. I didn't feel it until it slammed into me like a sledgehammer straight to the chest. And by then, it was too late. Way too late. Brooke Carter, the woman I built my whole life around, had already made up her mind. Our life together? It was just a stepping stone to her. She was ready to leave it behind without a second glance. And me? I was the idiot still standing at the bottom of the staircase, arms stretched up, waiting for a hand that was never going to reach back down. I had no clue what I was about to walk into that day. If I had, maybe I would have braced myself. Maybe I would have seen the tension hanging in the air the second I opened the door. But no. Even after all the years, some stupid part of me still believed in fairy tales. Still believed in happy endings. I stopped at the store on my way home from another brutal night shift. Bone tired, yeah, but somehow excited, too. I grabbed a cheap bouquet of roses and a card with "Proud of You" stamped in fat, shiny gold letters. I was ready to celebrate her. Celebrate us. Celebrate everything we had clawed and scraped our way toward. But the second I stepped through that door, I knew something was wrong. The apartment was too still, too staged, like a TV set, like I was the only one who hadn't gotten the script for the final episode. The first thing I saw was the champagne bottle. It caught the sunlight, glinting like bait, sitting there in the middle of the kitchen table, right next to a neat little stack of papers. And there she was, Brooke, glowing in her crisp, spotless white coat, the symbol of every single sacrifice we had made. She looked like every dream we'd ever chased. And for half a second, I smiled. For half a second, I thought we had made it. Until the ground crumbled out from under me. She turned around, her face shining, but it wasn't happiness. It was freedom. Raw, wild relief that had nothing to do with me. "You made it," she said. So light, so easy, popping the cork on the champagne like it was nothing. The foam spilled over, and she laughed, pouring 2 glasses without even glancing my way. I just stood there, like an idiot, setting the flowers down on the counter. They looked pathetic. Too bright. Too desperate. Completely out of place in a room that didn't feel like mine anymore. My hand reached for the papers, fingers trembling just enough to betray me. My heart pounded warnings against my ribs, shouting what my brain refused to hear. I didn't even need to read the title. I could feel it radiating off the stack like a cold front. Divorce agreement. Property split. There weren't any kids between us. Barely any assets either, just a battered old truck, a couch that sagged in the middle, and the worn-out furniture we bought secondhand when we were broke, stupid, and in love. I lifted my eyes to hers, searching, hoping still for some glimpse of the woman I had bled for, prayed for, built my entire damn world around. But Brooke only smiled wider, tapping her champagne glass against mine like this was some toast to a bright, glittering future I wasn't invited to. "I need to grow without deadweight holding me back," she said, light as a feather, like she was deciding to cut her hair short. Deadweight. That's all I was to her now. An anchor she needed to sever so she could fly higher without me dragging her down. The words knocked the wind clean out of me. I staggered internally, but outside I stayed still, stiff. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I knew deep down that any fight, any begging, would only dignify the story she had already decided to tell about me. The love we had shared didn't die in some grand explosion. It got buried. One cold, silent shovel of resentment at a time, under ambition, under disappointment, under dreams that stopped including me. I sank into the chair across from her, the wood groaning under the weight of everything crumbling inside me. My hand hovered over the pin she had so thoughtfully placed beside the papers. For one heartbeat, I thought about fighting. Thought about begging her to remember the nights we slept on a $40 air mattress. The nights I came home with my fingers stiff and cracked, just so she could make it to clinicals. The way I held the world together around her when she couldn't see straight through the migraines and doubt. But what would it change? Nothing. She had already decided. She had fought her way to a life, and I didn't have a place in it. So I signed. No drama. No begging. No accusations. Just one brutal scratch of the pen. Behind me, there it was, a soft, cruel laugh. I turned my head enough to see Lila, Brooke's best friend, leaning against the kitchen doorway, glass of champagne in hand, swirling it like she was at some upscale party, smirking at me like I was the night's entertainment. That's when it finally sank in. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a celebration. A liberation party for the girl who clawed her way free. I slid the signed papers across the table. Stood. The chair shrieked against the floorboards, loud, ugly, perfectly fitting. Brooke didn't thank me, didn't apologize. She just glanced down, nodded briskly, like I'd completed some final chore she'd assigned me. I walked out on legs that didn't feel like mine. Each step slow, numb. I didn't look back. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Let them laugh. Let them toast their shiny, unburdened futures. Outside, the world kept turning. Birds chirped. A lawnmower buzzed. Sunlight poured down, too bright, too careless, burning across the wreckage of the only life I had ever built. I climbed into my old pickup, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. For a long time, I just sat there, breathing, fighting to remember how to breathe when everything you built just turned into dust in your hands. 5 years ago, I promised her everything I had. Stone by stone, brick by bloody brick, I built a life around her. And in the span of one afternoon, a bottle of champagne, a few careless strokes of a pen, she bulldozed it all, not with anger, not even with cruelty, with indifference, the coldest weapon of all. I shoved the truck into gear, gravel crunching under the tires as I pulled away. I didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't even think. I just drove, one broken mile after another, trying to leave the wreckage behind. But you can't drive fast enough to outrun a ghost. The night air clung to me like a second skin as I packed up my life into the bed of that battered pickup. It didn't take long. A few clothes, some tools, an ancient coffee maker with a cracked handle, a cardboard box stuffed with memories I was too weak to throw away. I moved mechanical, silent, as if making noise might shatter the brittle walls barely holding me upright. But nobody came to stop me. Nobody even looked out the window. The apartment, our apartment, stared back at me, glowing warm and cozy. A mockery. I didn't expect Brooke to come running out. Didn't even hope for it anymore. But some stubborn, masochistic part of me still wanted her to. Still wanted her to care. Instead, the only one who showed was her mother, Carla. She leaned against the porch post, glass of wine sloshing lazily in her hand. Smiling at me. Not kindly. Not sympathetically. Smiling like she had won some long, ugly war. I didn't look at her. Didn't flinch when she raised her glass in a mocking toast. Her contempt didn't burn nearly as much as Brooke's absence. The engine of my truck rattled and coughed to life, too loud in the stillness. I slammed the door shut. Hard. Final. For the first time in years, there wasn't a single soul behind a window waiting for me to make it home. I was alone. Utterly, truly alone. I gripped the steering wheel, stealing one last glance in the rearview mirror. And that's when I saw her. Brooke. A blurry shape behind the thin curtains. She wasn't crying. Wasn't hesitating. She was laughing. Tossing her graduation cap into the air like she had just won the game of her life. The sight hit harder than any punch ever could. Tore the breath right out of my lungs. I swallowed the lump clawing up my throat. Shoved the truck into reverse. Rolled away slow and steady. No drama. No burnouts. Just one more ghost disappearing into the night. Every mile I drove wasn't just distance from a place. It was distance from the man I used to be. The man who once believed love alone could save everything. The man who begged for scraps of affection just to feel alive. And somewhere out there, somewhere I couldn't see yet, was the man I would have to become next. The phone buzzed on the passenger seat, Logan's name lighting up the screen. My brother. The one guy who would charge into a fire for me, whether I wanted him to or not. Especially when I didn't. I just stared at the screen, watched it flash and vibrate, until it slipped into voicemail without me lifting a finger. He'd already called 3 times today. Each message more frantic, more desperate. Ethan, don't do this, man. She's scared. She doesn't mean it. You guys can fix this. But he didn't get it. There wasn't any fixing something that had been rotting from the inside out for years. Not when the cracks weren't made by fights or betrayal you could point at, but by a slow, grinding erosion of promises, of affection, of hope. I wasn't fighting anymore. Not for someone who had stopped seeing me long before she stopped loving me. Not for a love that had turned into a transaction, canceled the minute the cost outweighed the benefit. I silenced the phone, shoved it deep into the glove box, and slammed it shut like I was locking away a part of myself I wasn't ready to look at yet. The buzzing faded to nothing, buried under steel and plastic. And as I drove, mile after mile into nowhere, something unexpected cracked open inside me. I felt lighter, terrifyingly lighter. Like a man who's worn chains so long he forgot what his own skin felt like. It almost hurt to be free. I didn't have a plan. No apartment lined up. No job waiting. No 6-step roadmap to a shiny new life. Just a few $1,000 in the bank, a busted-up truck, in a duffel bag packed in a blur of heartbreak. And yet, for the first time in years, I also had something priceless. Freedom. Raw. Lonely. Mine. Somewhere out there, past the wreckage, past the ghosts, there had to be a life where I didn't have to shrink to fit someone else's dream. I drove until the city lights shrank away behind me, until the skyline was swallowed by stars, until the hole in my chest stopped feeling like it was going to cave me in. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just knew it had to be somewhere far enough that even the memory of her laughter couldn't reach me. Somewhere I could be, just Ethan. Not Ethan the shift worker. Not Ethan the delivery boy. Not Ethan the loyal idiot clinging to a dying dream. Just me. When the first gray hints of dawn bled over the hills, I pulled onto a deserted country road. Fields stretched wide and wild on either side, mist curling over them like slow, sleepy ghosts. I shut off the engine. Sat there, letting the silence fill every broken place inside me. I cracked open the glove box again, pulling out my phone one last time. No missed calls. No messages. No second chances. The finality stung briefly. Then it faded. I scrolled to her name. Paused. Some foolish, stubborn part of me still whispered. Maybe she'll realize she made a mistake. Maybe she'll call. But I knew better. Hope is a cruel thing. It doesn't die clean. It clings and rots and poisons. I hit delete. Watched her name vanish into nothing. Watched the final thread snap loose. I dropped the phone back into the glove box. Closed it gently this time, like sealing a coffin. I didn't cry. The tears had dried up somewhere between the sound of Lila's laughter and the sight of Brooke tossing her cap like it was a trophy. What lived inside me now wasn't grief. It wasn't rage. It was something colder, sharper, stronger. Resolve. I was done begging. Done handing over pieces of myself to people who never planned to keep them. From now on, every breath, every choice, every damn mile would belong to me. As the sun cracked over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised pinks and battered golds, a thought settled deep in my bones. I wasn't lost. I wasn't broken. I was free. Willow Bend wasn't a place you found on a map. You had to be looking for nothing to end up there, which made it perfect. I didn't want busy. I didn't want shiny. I didn't want anybody asking questions I didn't want to answer. When I rolled into Willow Bend, my truck rattling like an old man too stubborn to quit, I knew without a doubt I was exactly where I needed to be. It wasn't much. A handful of brick buildings slumping against the weight of time. A gas station with one pump older than I was. A diner with a cracked sign that just said Clyde's. I parked in front because, honestly, I didn't know what else to do. My stomach gnawed hollow inside me after a night of nothing but road dust and broken dreams. When I pushed open the door to Clyde's, the smell of bacon and coffee wrapped around me like a worn, familiar jacket. A few old men nursed their breakfasts, boots tapping slow rhythms against scuffed linoleum. The woman behind the counter gave me a nod. Not friendly, not suspicious. Just knowing. Like she'd seen 1,000 ghosts like me drift in and out. I slid into a cracked vinyl booth by the window. The morning sun stretched long fingers across the table, painting everything in dusty gold. I hadn't even touched the menu when a gravelly voice said, "Coffee." I looked up. Clyde. Big arms like tree trunks, gray hair bristling under a battered ball cap. Eyes sharp enough to carve you down to size. I nodded. No words needed. He poured a mug in front of me. "You new here?" he asked, voice rough but not unfriendly. "Just passing through," I lied. Even though, deep down, I knew I wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Clyde just grunted. Slid a plate of bacon and eggs onto the table like he didn't much care whether I asked for it or not. I stared at it a little too long, feeling something tighten in my chest. It had been a long damn time since anyone gave me something without expecting something in return. The days blurred after that, turned into weeks without me noticing. I found work fast. A man named Hank ran a rough, ragged construction crew that needed anyone with 2 hands and a pulse. The pay wasn't good. The work was backbreaking, but it was real. We hauled cinder blocks, mixed concrete by hand, hammered nails until our hands split and bled. It hurt, but it was the kind of hurt you could be proud of. A pain that didn't hollow you out. It built you back, piece by piece. At night, after the boots came off and the dust settled, I drifted back to Clyde's. The jukebox wheezed out old country songs nobody bothered to update. The mugs were chipped. The counter leaned like it had finally accepted gravity's slow defeat. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't impressive. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. One night, Clyde tossed a set of keys across the counter without warning. Studio upstairs, he said, jerking a thumb toward a battered stairwell in the back. Cheap. If you don't mind fixing it up yourself. I caught the keys out of the air without thinking. Didn't even hesitate. I needed a place that was mine. Even if it was broken. Maybe especially if it was broken. The studio wasn't much. A mattress on the floor. A dresser missing a drawer. A bathroom faucet that whined like a dying cat. But it didn't belong to Brooke. It didn't belong to the life I left behind. It was mine. 4 walls. 1 door. No expectations. And for the first time in longer than I cared to admit, it was enough. It was waiting to be shaped. Like wet clay in my hands, my life was something raw, unformed, a blank I didn't know how to fill yet. Clyde and I never really talked about it, but we understood each other without needing words. I helped around the diner when I wasn't on construction crews, tightening pipes, fixing broken stools, hauling grease traps no one else wanted to touch. In return, Clyde slipped me a little cash under the table, kept my coffee cup full, kept the questions to himself. Sometimes he found me late at night, sleeves rolled up to my elbows, arms streaked with grease, the jukebox mumbling old country songs into the dim air. One night, after the last customer left and the neon lights outside flickered into the dark, Clyde slid a beer across the counter without a word. "You ain't broken, son," he said, voice low, heavy with things he didn't say. "You're just unappreciated." Big difference. I stared at him a long time, not sure whether to laugh, cry, or just let myself crumble right there. In the end, I just nodded, held the cold beer in my hands like an anchor. Maybe he was right. Maybe getting left behind didn't mean you were worthless. Maybe it just meant you gave yourself to the wrong people. Little by little, no grand gestures, no dramatic revelations, I started stitching myself back together. Quietly, clumsily, by fixing the squeaky diner door, by sanding down an old motorcycle frame I bought off some guy for $200, by watching the sunrise crack open the sky over Willow Bend's endless fields, by breathing without apology. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not Logan. Not my parents. Definitely not Brooke. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't pride. It was protection. The hope growing inside me was too fragile for the world I had left behind. One night, after Clyde locked up and the streets fell into that deep velvet quiet, I climbed to the roof above my little studio. Sat there with my legs dangling into the cool night air. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't chasing anything either. I was just still, healing. Willow Bend didn't ask who I used to be. It didn't ask anything at all. It just let me breathe. Let me figure out, piece by piece, who Ethan Carter might be without the wreckage of somebody else's dreams tangled around his feet. The road behind me was closed. The road ahead was thick with fog. But it was my road. That was enough. It didn't happen all at once, that feeling of belonging. It crept in slow, like the first shy warmth of a sunrise after a long winter. I barely noticed at first. But one day I looked around and realized I had built something. I bought a house just outside town. If you could call it a house. More like a sagging skeleton of one. The porch leaned forward like it was about to surrender to gravity. The roof leaked. Vines clawed their way up the sides, trying to take it back for the earth. Most people would have laughed. Most people would have driven right past. But I stood there, keys in my hand, and all I saw was possibility. It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be mine. I spent every spare hour working on it, tearing out rotten floorboards, patching the leaking roof with scrap lumber from construction sites, learning the hard way that even simple things, like hanging a door straight, could take a dozen tries and a few cuss-it-up storms. Every nail I drove down was a battle, a prayer, a promise to myself. You're still here. You're still standing. The town noticed me in that quiet way small towns do. Nods at the grocery store. Smiles at the gas station. Coffee poured without asking at Clyde's. Hank introduced me to the guys at the VFW hall. Soon I was helping build wheelchair ramps, patch old fences, haul firewood before the first snow hit. It wasn't much. It wasn't the future Brooke and I had once built castles out of in our heads. But it was real. It was solid. It was mine. No betrayals. No lies. Just hard work and handshakes you could count on. And then, there was Ivy. I met her on one of those heavy afternoons when the air feels like breathing through wet wool. I was fixing the porch rail at the diner, sweat running down my back, when a dusty silver SUV rolled up. Dust boiled around it, turning the whole street into a golden haze. She stepped out, camera slung around her neck. boots scuffed from hard miles, a denim jacket frayed at the edges, hair tied up messily like she had better things to chase than appearances. She glanced around, wide-eyed and curious, soaking everything in like she was trying to memorize it. Our eyes met, and she smiled. Simple, uncomplicated, no armor, no games. The kind of smile you don't realize you've been starving for until it's right in front of you. I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow with the back of my hand. She walked straight over, fearless. "You're not from around here," she said, her voice light, teasing, not accusing. "Just a fact." I shrugged. "Guess that makes two of us." She laughed, low and easy. Not the sharp, practiced laughter I remembered from Brooke. This was real, rough around the edges, human. She told me her name was Ivy Bennett, traveling photographer, documenting small towns and forgotten places, chasing stories the world forgot how to see. I didn't have much to say about myself, and she didn't ask. She just sat on the porch steps, camera resting in her lap, soaking in the sleepy afternoon like she had all the time in the world. She came back, again and again, sometimes ordering pie and coffee, sometimes just sitting quietly, flipping through her endless rolls of photos. Once, she found me out back sanding down the motorcycle frame, asked if she could take my picture. At first, I said no. Didn't want to be frozen like that, captured as the broken man clawing his way out of the rubble. But Ivy had a way of looking at you, not with pity, not with expectation, just seeing you as you were. Eventually, I gave in. She snapped a few shots of me working, sunlight catching the dust and sweat on my skin. When she showed me the photos, I braced myself, expected to see failure staring back. But I didn't. I saw a man still standing, still breathing, still fighting. Ivy never asked about my past. She didn't need to. She just stayed close enough that when I was ready to talk, I could. And one night, sitting on the tailgate of my truck under a sky so thick with stars it looked like the heavens had cracked wide open, I found myself telling her everything. Everything I hadn't said out loud in years. I told her everything. The 6 years of tomorrows I handed to someone who never planned to stay. The nights lying awake, torturing myself, asking what I could have done differently, what I could have been to make her stay. The quiet rage that still sometimes coiled in my chest when I thought about Brooke's laughter echoing behind me, sharp and bright, as I drove away from the ruins of the life I built for her. Ivy just listened. No interruptions. No cheap words. No, "You'll find someone else," or "Everything happens for a reason," lies meant to bandage something that needed real healing. When the words finally dried up, and there was nothing left but the heavy, raw ache in my throat, she reached over and wrapped her fingers around mine. Simple. Steady. Sure. "You deserve to be loved where you're celebrated," she said, voice soft but firm. Not tolerated. And something cracked open inside me. Something raw. Something buried so deep I didn't even know it was still there. For years, I had twisted myself smaller and smaller, folding down the edges of who I was, trying to be patient enough, easy enough, invisible enough for someone who had already decided I wasn't what she wanted. But with Ivy, there was no tightrope to walk. No test to pass. I could just be. For the first time in a decade, I started to believe maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair. Maybe getting left behind wasn't where my story ended. Maybe it was just where the better one began. One I would write with my own hands, in a town where nobody demanded explanations, sitting on the porch of a crumbling house I was slowly making strong again. And this time, I wasn't chasing anyone else's dreams. This time, I was finally chasing my own. Back in the city, the world Brooke had fought so hard to build was starting to come apart, thread by painful thread. Of course, I didn't know it then. I had stopped checking, stopped wondering. In my mind, she had everything she ever wanted, the degree, the freedom, the blank slate without me weighing her down. I pictured her beaming, thriving, moving through life with that dazzling smile she used to have when she spoke about the future. I figured she had erased me the way you wipe a chalkboard clean. Quick. Efficient. No trace left. I was wrong. Brooke's new life wasn't the polished fairy tale she imagined. The cracks showed fast. Lila, the best friend who toasted my exit with champagne, turned out to be more wrecking ball than safety net. The wild nights, the endless parties, the mornings spent nursing hangovers and shame, they didn't stay harmless. They became the pattern. The damage stitched itself into Brooke's days like bad seams in a fraying dress. And Carla, her mother, never let her forget it. Hovering. Judging. Treating Brooke's life like a pageant she was failing to win. Every missed job offer. Every bad date. Every stumble became another lecture about wasted potential, Another cold reminder that freedom without applause wasn't worth much. The pride she wore on graduation day dulled under 12-hour shifts and the exhaustion of being invisible inside hospitals full of patients and doctors who saw her as just another replaceable set of hands. The work wasn't a dream. The paycheck wasn't enough to buy the happiness she had once imagined came with it. And the loneliness was a heavier chain than any I had ever placed around her life. The men she dated blurred together. Empty smiles. Empty promises. None of them stayed. None of them tried to know her the way I had. Not the way I had loved her, with patience, with loyalty, with hope so reckless it made me blind. She had traded gold for glitter. And when the glitter blew away, she was left holding ashes. Empty. Lost. One night, digging through an old drawer looking for something she couldn't even name, Brooke stumbled across a photograph. Us. Standing in front of our first apartment, stupidly proud, holding up a set of beat-up keys like we had won the world. I had my arm wrapped around her shoulders, and she was laughing, really laughing, the way she used to, before everything got so complicated. Before ambition made her forget what happiness actually looked like. The sight of it punched the air right out of her. She sat down hard on the floor, photograph trembling in her hands. And she remembered. The man who worked 3 jobs just so she could chase her dreams. The man who stood outside in the freezing rain with a thermos of hot chocolate and a heart full of belief when she couldn't find it for herself. The man who stitched together a future out of nothing and asked for nothing back. And slowly, horribly, she realized. She hadn't thrown me away for a better life. She had thrown me away for an illusion. She mistook ambition for fulfillment, freedom for joy. And chasing that fantasy cost her the one person who had never asked her to be anything more than herself. That night, surrounded by empty wine bottles and unopened bills, she broke. She didn't cry for the life she lost. She cried for the man she left standing there, heart in his hands, crushed roses bleeding onto a cheap countertop. For the first time, she wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was ashamed. But shame doesn't hand you a map back. It doesn't offer second chances on a silver platter. It festers. It twists you up inside, rotting your reflection until you can't recognize the face in the mirror. It makes you desperate. Makes you pick up your phone in the middle of the night, scrolling through old numbers with shaking fingers, praying you didn't delete the one name you swore you'd never need again. But some mistakes don't come with do-overs. Some bridges, once burned, aren't just broken, they're gone. And sometimes, when you finally realize what you lost, all you can do is stare across a river you'll never cross again. Meanwhile, in Willow Bend, I wasn't looking back. I wasn't mourning anymore. I wasn't pacing circles around my past. I was building something. With my hands. With my heart. With pieces of myself I once thought were lost for good. I wasn't the man who packed his life into a truck and drove away from everything he knew. I was something new. Someone stronger. Someone Brooke wouldn't recognize if she tried. And soon enough. She would try. It didn't start with a wave. It started with a ripple. It started small. A few missed calls. Some vague emails from addresses I didn't recognize. At first, I barely gave them a second thought. Willow Bend wasn't the kind of place strangers stumbled into, and I kept my circle tight. If you didn't know where I was, you weren't supposed to. The messages were strange, too polite, too careful. No names. No explanations. Just soft taps on a door I wasn't interested in opening. I ignored them all. Because sometimes, the best armor you can wear is silence. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that somewhere, back in a polished apartment in a city that didn't feel like home anymore, a search had begun. Brooke had finally realized something she never thought possible. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't parked by a window, hurting, hoping she'd come to her senses. I wasn't frozen in the ruins she left behind, holding out a hand she slapped away without a second glance. I was gone. Really, truly gone. And the realization hit her harder than any argument, any slammed door, any goodbye she thought was final. The first number she dialed was Logan's, my brother. He had always been easier to find than me. But Brooke was too late. Logan had chased his own future west, carving out a life too far away from the wreckage she left behind. When she called, he didn't answer. When she texted, he answered with 2 words. Not my problem. She didn't give up. Not yet. She clawed through the old ways, mutual friends, dusty contact lists, neighbors who barely remembered our names. But she came up empty. Because when I left, I didn't just pack my clothes into a battered truck. I packed up my whole life. No breadcrumbs. No map back. No door left cracked open for regrets to slip through. I didn't want to be found. Not by her. Not by anyone. But desperation makes smart people reckless. Turns pride into panic. She ripped through social media, combed through forgotten LinkedIn profiles, scoured buried Facebook pages nobody updated anymore. And eventually, she stumbled across a ghost, an old listing for Clyde's Diner. Buried metadata. An old picture. A new name. Hope's Corner Cafe. She messaged the page, probably picturing me still scrubbing dishes in the back, trapped in a small, sad life she thought I would never escape. But Clyde's niece ran it now. And she didn't know me. She ignored the message. Dead end. Frustrated, Brooke drove to my parents' old house, thinking maybe the past could still offer her a lifeline. But that house wasn't ours anymore. Strangers answered the door with warm smiles and loud children at their heels. No Ethan Carter here. Never heard of him. The panic bloomed inside her then fast, ugly, unstoppable. Funny, isn't it? You can walk away from someone thinking you've won, only to realize, way too late, you lost everything that mattered. Brooke had always believed, deep down, that if she ever changed her mind, I would still be there. Still waiting. Still desperate. Still hers. But the man she left behind didn't exist anymore. Back in Willow Bend, I was too busy living to notice the storm crawling closer. Most days, I was up to my elbows in engine grease, sanding down the frame of an old Harley, the smell of oil and sun-warmed metal thick in the air. If I wasn't at the bike shop, I was patching up the house, dragging rotted boards out, hammering something stronger into place. And sometimes, more and more lately, Ivy's laughter filled the quiet spaces between the noise. Soft. Genuine. A sound that settled in the cracks inside me I once thought were too deep to heal. She never pried. Never pushed when I drifted into silence. She just stayed close enough that when I was ready to let the light in, it didn't feel like an ambush. It felt like breathing. If Brooke's search had a soundtrack, it would have been frantic fingers pounding keyboards, the hollow thud of unanswered calls, the fading echo of a woman chasing ghosts. Every dead end cut deeper. Every missed connection twisted the knife harder. Because Brooke wasn't just losing me. She was losing the part of herself that ever meant something real. The man she discarded wasn't crawling back through broken glass for another chance. He had built something new. Something untouchable. Something she would never be part of again. When desperation finally swallowed her whole, she did what desperate people always do. She reached too far. Held on too tight. Started grasping at anything that looked like a chance. Old numbers. Old friends. Random faces in coffee shops, trying to piece together a trail that had long since vanished. But sometimes, when you burn a bridge, you don't just lose the way back. You lose the ground underneath you too. Meanwhile, I lived without her shadow dogging my steps. Without her laugh haunting my sleep. Without the weight of wondering what if. I didn't feel the storm rolling toward me. But even if I had, I wouldn't have flinched. When you build your life from ashes, fire doesn't scare you anymore. That Thursday afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the rain. It came down in heavy sheets, hammering the roof of the Second Chance Cafe like a drumbeat you could feel in your bones. I had just finished a long shift at the bike shop, my hands still stained with oil, my body aching in that good, honest way. I didn't rush. I peeled off my soaked jacket, raked a hand through my dripping hair, and ordered my usual coffee from Sadie, Clyde's niece. She smiled at me. Warm. Familiar. The kind of smile that expects nothing from you but your presence. I slid into my usual corner booth, the one with the view of Main Street disappearing under the silver curtain of rain. It wasn't until I dug my phone out of my pocket that I saw it. The screen lit up, bright, angry. 157 missed calls. I blinked, thinking maybe the storm had messed with the phone. But no. I scrolled. One number. Over and over. Relentless. Breathless. Whoever it was, they weren't the giving up kind. Curiosity wrestled with instinct. Curiosity won. I pressed redial. Lifted the phone to my ear. Listened to it ring. And waited for the past answer. The phone barely rang once before it clicked alive. Ethan. The voice cracked through the line. Raw. Broken. Shaking so badly it barely sounded human. But I knew it. Some voices bury themselves so deep in your bones that no amount of time or pain can scrub them away. It was Brooke. I sat there, the rain hammering against the windows of the Second Chance Cafe, the low murmur of small-town life fading into a far-off hum. For a long breath, I said nothing. She was crying. Messy, guttural sobs that didn't care about dignity or distance. The kind of grief that comes when you realize the damage wasn't to someone else, it was to yourself. Words tumbled out of her like rocks falling down a cliff. I made a mistake, Ethan. God, the biggest mistake of my life. I was stupid. I thought I knew what I wanted. Her voice cracked in two, raw and desperate. I need you. Please. I'll do anything. I can fix this. I can fix us. I leaned back in the booth, coffee steaming quietly between my hands. And I felt nothing sharp. No anger. No ache. Just distance. Just clarity. Once, maybe even months ago, those words would have gutted me. I would have clung to them like wreckage in a storm, bleeding myself dry just to believe they were real. But not now. Now, all I heard was panic. The panic of someone realizing too late that not all hearts wait forever. I let the silence stretch between us, long and hollow. Let her spill more desperate words into it. Apologies, promises, tattered memories flung like lifelines. I listened. Maybe because I owed it to the man I used to be. Maybe because some part of me needed to hear how far the distance between us had truly grown. Or maybe because I didn't owe her anything at all. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't shake. It didn't break. It was steady, clear, final. I'm not the man you left behind anymore. The words cut through the phone line like a blade through silk. Simple, irrevocable. I didn't offer a rope back. Didn't crack the door open a sliver. Some things, once broken, don't get repaired. They get buried. There was a long, hollow silence on her end. I pictured her, wherever she was, sitting alone, the walls shrinking around her, the realization sinking into her bones. You can't always undo the damage. Sometimes, you don't get a second chance. Before she could find another desperate word to toss into the void. I hung up, not out of anger, not out of cruelty, out of mercy. For her. For me. For the boy I had once been, the boy who would have burned himself alive to keep a love alive that was already ashes. He deserved peace. And the man I had become? He was strong enough to give it to him. I set the phone face down on the table, wrapped my hands tighter around the warm coffee mug. The heat seeped into my palms. Real. Solid. Alive. Around me, life went on. Clyde's laughter drifted from the kitchen. The jukebox crackled into a low country ballad about losing yourself and finding something better. Outside, the rain blurred the town into a silver watercolor. But inside me, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was clear. I was whole. Ivy slid into the booth across from me, her hair damp from the rain, curling softly around her face. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She just reached across the table, found my hand, and squeezed. Solid. Steady. Here. I squeezed back, a silent thank you heavy with everything I didn't have to explain. Brooke's voice still echoed faintly in my mind, but it didn't hurt anymore. It didn't cut. It didn't reach inside and rip me apart. It was just a sound now. Another door closed. Another ghost laid to rest. She had made her choice. And now, finally, so had I. 2 days later, the real storm didn't fall from the sky. It walked right through the front door of the Second Chance Cafe. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that usually hummed with quiet conversations, warm biscuits, and fresh coffee. I was behind the counter with Clyde, wiping down mugs, laughing about the upcoming county fair. The bell above the door jingled, but not soft, not lazy, sharp, violent. A crack through the easy rhythm of the morning. The air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the jukebox hiccuped and fell silent. I didn't need to turn around. I already knew. Brooke. I turned slowly, towel still wrapped in my hands. She stood there, dripping rainwater onto the floor. Her mascara ran in jagged rivers down her cheeks. Her jacket clung to her like a second, shivering skin. She clutched her soggy purse against her chest, like it might somehow hold her together. She looked small, broken. Nothing like the woman who once toasted my heartbreak like a victory. Ivy sat at the counter a few stools down. She turned her head, took everything in with one glance. No panic. No judgment. Just calm, quiet strength. She didn't move. She didn't have to. She was a lighthouse standing steady while the storm raged. Brooke's eyes found mine. The room shrank around us. She stumbled forward, voice cracking the silence apart. Ethan, please. She dropped to her knees on the diner floor, the sound of it echoing louder than any thunderclap. The whole cafe froze. Gasps. Chairs scraping softly backward. Even Clyde leaned in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching like a man who'd seen too many tragedies end exactly like this. She crawled a few feet toward the counter, reaching for me with shaking fingers. Tears mixed with rain on her face. Her voice came in broken sobs. I'm sorry, she choked out. I was stupid. Selfish. I thought I needed to find myself, but all I did was lose everything that mattered. The diner sat frozen, breathing with me, waiting, watching, but I didn't move. Because the boy I used to be, the one who would have collapsed at her feet, believing love could fix anything, he was gone. The man standing here now? He knew exactly who he was. And he wasn't going back. I knelt down beside her. Not to comfort, not to save, but so she could see me, really see me. Face to face. No distance. No escape hatch. I looked into her eyes, the same ones I had once memorized in the dark, the same ones I had once sworn to protect at any cost. All I saw now was wreckage. The ruin of choices you can't undo, no matter how hard you wish you could. My voice was low, steady, meant only for her. You taught me how to be invisible, I said, each word cutting clean and slow. You taught me that loyalty, sacrifice, love, none of it mattered if it wasn't convenient for you. She shook her head fiercely, mouthing no, no, over and over again, as if sheer denial could erase the truth. But I kept going. Because this wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. You made me a ghost, I whispered. Now you'll know how that feels. I rose to my feet, slow and deliberate. Every eye in the cafe clung to the space between us. But I only felt one gaze anchoring me, the steady, unwavering presence of Ivy. My lifeline. My home. Brooke stayed kneeling, staring up at me, broken, reaching for a hand that was never going to reach back. I had no lifelines left to give her. Not without drowning myself again. Without looking back, I walked to Ivy. She set her tea down gently, stood to meet me with quiet strength. I reached for her hand, the hand that had held me through every silent rebuild, every step toward becoming whole again. I lifted her hand to my lips and kissed it, right there in front of everyone. Not as a weapon, not as a victory lap, as a vow. This was my life now. This was where my loyalty lived. This was where love chose to stay. Ivy smiled, a soft, private thing, and squeezed my hand back. Not claiming. Not rescuing, just standing beside me. Behind us, Brooke let out a low, broken sob, a sound that cracked against the walls and shivered through the air. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. As we walked toward the door, life in the diner began to breathe again. Chairs scraped. Forks clinked. Conversation, awkward at first, found its way back into the light. Life doesn't pause for regret. Clyde caught my eye and tipped an imaginary hat, a small, silent salute from one survivor to another. Outside, the rain had softened into a mist. Gentle, forgiving. I helped Ivy into the truck, climbed in beside her. For a while, we just sat there. The windows fogged with our breathing. The world outside blurred into silver and green and soft golds. Ivy leaned her head against my shoulder. You okay? She asked quietly. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the years spent twisting myself into knots for someone who could never see me. About the brutal climb out of the pit she left me in. About the long, slow building of a life that finally fit me. I pressed a kiss to Ivy's temple. Smiled. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm free. I started the engine. Pulled away from the cafe. Away from the wreckage of a life that had never been meant to hold me. And somewhere between the mist and the open road, a thought settled into my chest like a second heartbeat. Some ghosts aren't meant to haunt you. Some ghosts are meant to teach you how to live again. Life didn't snap into place overnight. It didn't stitch up all the old wounds in one neat line. Healing wasn't a straight road. Willow Ben taught me that. Taught me that real healing wins and doubles back, gets messy before it moves forward. But every scar was mine now. Every crack in my chest. Every broken place I once tried to hide for someone else's comfort. I wore them openly, proudly. Ivy and I built a life together. The way a craftsman builds a house. Slow, careful, patient. No shortcuts. No pretending. She didn't complete me. I wasn't a puzzle missing a piece. We were two whole people who chose each other. Day after day. Not to save. Not to fix. But to walk beside each other. When we got married, it wasn't in a grand ballroom or under gilded ceilings. It was beneath the big oak tree behind the cafe. The one that had shaded so many small, sacred mornings. Jess officiated, holding a battered old Bible and making half of it up as he went along. The whole town showed up. Sadie from the diner. Hank and his crew. Even the mayor, offering a blessing between bites of barbecue. Ivy wore a simple cotton dress that fluttered like a heartbeat in the breeze. I wore the only suit I owned, pressed and proud. No bridesmaids. No groomsmen. No spotlights. Just two people, under the open sky, promising something real. Not perfection. Not fantasy. Just love. Rooted deep. Built to last. Later, we danced barefoot on the grass, the scratchy old record skipping and crackling through the air. Children raced wild through fields of laughter. Someone lit a bonfire that turned the sky molten as the sun fell. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was ours. That summer, I opened a motorcycle repair shop. Just a little brick building tucked a few streets from the cafe. It smelled of oil and rust and hope. I spent my days rebuilding engines and teaching local boys who had too much fire in their blood and too little hope in their eyes. We didn't talk much about life. We talked about machines. And somehow, that was enough. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised golds and deep blues, my phone would light up with a number I didn't need to check. I never answered. Never blocked it either. Ghosts don't need battles. They need silence. Sometimes, sitting outside the shop with a coffee in hand and Ivy's camera slung at her side, I'd think about Brooke. About the boy I used to be. About the man I had become. And I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel pity. I just understood. Some goodbyes aren't punishments. They're gifts. The hardest kind. The kind that saves your life without you realizing it at first. Ivy would lean her head against my shoulder. And I'd smile. Steady. Whole. Home. Because I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I wasn't running from anything either. I was already where I was meant to be. A life. A love. A forever carved with calloused hands and an open, fearless heart. And you know what? I didn't become a new hero. I became me.